Call this meeting to order. If you would follow along with a pledge and Marshall will give the invocation.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bow your heads with me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this afternoon, the ability to gather together as community leaders and citizens alike to be able to make the decisions that are best for the future of this community. We also thank you for these special study sessions where we're able to study things that we will possibly vote on in the future so that we can become more well-informed and put in the work it takes to treat our residents well. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Marshall. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Lucas. Denham.
Here.
Cooper.
Here.
Milton.
Here.
Alden. LeBlanc.
Yes.
Schultz.
Here.
And let the record show Alderman Schultz is attending remotely.
Hello, Alderman Schultz. So on our agenda is a discussion of Land Clearance Redevelopment Authority and Blight Remediation presented by Holly.
Hello, thank you. Super exciting topic tonight, and I'm not even kidding. So tonight we're going to learn about LCRA and land banks. LCRA is actually the Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority, and that is already passed by statute. So what your option is whether or not you want to enact it as a board and as the citizenry vote to give that authority to the Land Clearance Redevelopment Authority. We're going to talk tonight about their process, the authority, and example projects, as well as the new revisions to the land bank statutes, which allow clearing of title if you create within your municipality, which you now have available to you that you did not before, the ability to create a land bank, which allows a system to clear the title to property which had not been in place before. So they essentially rewrote the land bank system this year. So to start off with, the LCRA is enacted in Chapter 99, 300 to 715. It must be authorized by the governing body, that's the board here, and the voters. So you have to have both things happen to empower the LCRA locally. You do have an option for a regional authority, and we're not really going to talk about that much tonight, but that is an option. If it's something you want to do on a grander scale as a group, that is an option for the LCRA. The Board of Commissioners are the governing body of an LCRA. Those 5 members are appointed by the mayor. The mayor chooses the chairperson. They are for 4-year terms. The members of the commission must be taxpayers who have resided in the city for over 5 years. And that's important because they've got some perspective, and they've got, because they're within the taxing authority, they are a taxable person, so that's helpful. In authorizing the LCRA, it has to be authorized either by resolution or ordinance. I know this group prefers resolutions. And it has to be voted on by the voters. The voters only have to give approval by a simple majority. Then the Board of Aldermen must find, and as part of that resolution process, they must find that one or more blighted or insanitary areas exist within the community, as well as that the development of those areas is necessary for the interest of public health, safety, morals, and welfare of the residents, which makes sense. If you have an area that is blighted or insanitary, to correct that action is, of course, going to be to those benefits. The authority may not exercise any powers until authorized by the board. The board can't authorize it until it's passed by the voters. So they're kind of stacked on top of each other. The definition of blight is essentially what you probably already are familiar with. Blight is a pretty broad concept. It is when there are unsafe conditions or deterioration of site improvements or the existence of conditions which endanger life or property by fire or other causes. So think about, you've got a shack that's falling down that becomes a fire hazard. Also, areas of accumulation of trash or tires or those kinds of things are also conditions in which they endanger life and property by fire or other causes, or combination of factors. Retards the provision of housing accommodation, so it's an area that you can't have housing near it because it's dangerous. Or constitutes an economic or social liability. Doesn't look good, right? That people don't continue to wander into the city. Or a menace to public health, safety, or welfare. And I think the concept of blight with the recent movement in decision-making regarding homeless encampments and those concerns also can be an easier aspect of determining blight than what it was previous to the recent determinations by the Supreme Court. Insanitary is not dirty and germ-filled. It is dilapidated, deteriorated, age, or obsolescence. Inadequate provisions of ventilation, light, or air sanitation. Think in terms of boarded structure. A boarded structure is going to generally be dilapidated, is going to be deteriorating, is going to be old, because I'm going to choose to board my structure and not use it because it costs too much, right? So once it becomes too much of a burden to the property owner, you tend to see the abandonment and the mere boarding of the structure, because that's something we require. Because otherwise, what do we know? We know people go in and camp in it. People go in and commit crimes in it. So insanitary is a much broader concept than, germs. So don't think in those terms, but it has to meet one of those two, blight or insanitary. The powers of the LCRA. So once you set up an LCRA, you empower it through a vote by a resolution or ordinance by the board, as well as a vote by a simple majority of the citizens. These are some of the things that the LCRA can do to spur economic development or spur abating the insanitary or blight conditions. You can prepare a redevelopment or urban renewal plan. That is a great signal that this is a priority of the city, right? So that's a way to say, and you guys have had previous discussions of areas you have concerns with, to carry out its own land clearance and urban renewal projects. So within an area that is determined to be part of the plan, if some of that property is owned by the city or the LCRA by donation or by acquisition, it then can clear that land. By clearing the land, you make it more palatable for a larger development, which could be part of an economic incentive that maybe the city wants to spur development of an entire area, which would be part of the urban renewal plan or the redevelopment plan. LCRA can have contracts to repair, can have contracts to purchase, to lease, to gift, to demo, to build, to rehab. They can create situations in which they have a program for rehabilitation. So take a pot of money and encourage those within an area, maybe a section of property that you see some dilapidation, some loss of structures, but the rest of them could be saved and could be reutilized or refurbished. So you can utilize incentives within that area to get those property owners to voluntarily repair or rehab their property, or their landlords, right? We have a definite need for ownership for landlords. It also has relocation for families and to delegate to the municipality the powers which they already have to undertake the land clearance project. Redevelopment plans for the LCRA, they submit their redevelopment, typo. The redevelopment or urban renewal plan is submitted the same as any other plan. It goes through that same process of going through the planning commission, discuss it, public hearing, goes to Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen has a public hearing regarding it. The plan must indicate the relationship to the city objectives as to appropriate land use, improved traffic, public transportation, public utilities, recreation, and community facilities. So it's got to be part of the overall zoning plan, the overall desires within that area. The board may find an area to be blighted or unsanitary and approve a plan simultaneously, so you don't have to do one versus the other. You can do it all at once. One of the examples here is what Lee's Summit did. They had a plan area, which is going to be in the blue. It is part of their downtown core LCRA, and part of that plan included rehabilitation of structures, getting some new builds. So commonly in any area that is part of this, you're going to see a combination of actions. Some of the areas you guys have talked about, maybe the properties or the structures or the prior uses have lost their ability, and what you would be looking at is clearing the land and finding a new use within that area that is certainly needs to be complementary to the surrounding area. So that's the LCRA portion of my, so I've got your thoughts going. One of the aspects that is always a challenge is who owns the property. And the redefinition of land banks and the creation and simplification of the land bank system, providing it as an option for cities, allows you to be a part of the process of delinquent properties. So properties that go 2 years delinquent, it's tax foreclosure, right? So you go 2 years delinquent, tax foreclosure, it's offered at the sale, third Monday, I believe, of August. And if no sale, and that sale must be for all taxable liabilities on the property. What it used to be was, but you still got it subject to the mortgages. You got it subject to all the other problems. Then no bid. Next year, you offer it up, no bid. The fifth year, the fifth offering, the fifth year of nobody caring about the property because they didn't pay the taxes, then the county collector can offer that property at whatever value they see fit, essentially, for a use that they see fit. And this puts your position outside of your control. If you have a land bank, create a land bank agency, and you create that by ordinance, the requirements are that you name your land bank agency, so it'd be Branson Land Bank. You choose the number of board members, it's between 5 and 11. You choose the initial board members and their terms. You set how long they need to be on the land bank board. You select the appointment and process of the board members, who should be qualified board members, and the terms of those board members. The purpose ultimately of a land bank, and this is what they also injected into the statute that didn't used to be there, is to return the land to use in either private ownership or public use. So it could end up being a park. That could be a temporary use for a long-term plan. But it also is where you want to get it back in the system so that you get the tax-paying dollars back in play, right? So it has a use and it serves a purpose for the community as a whole. Again, it's governed by the board of directors with 5 to 11 members. The powers of a land bank are they adopt, amend, and repeal their bylaws. So they set their own rules. They can sue or be sued. They can borrow from the city. They can get insurance. They can get guarantees. They can contract. They can contract for the boarding of their properties, demolition of their properties, mowing of their properties, cleanup of their properties, investing money. They can improve the property. They can acquire additional property. There is a caveat on that. That additional property that they acquire must be adjacent to property already owned. And they can adopt a seal. Thank you. That's what I was going to do, but then they said that wasn't appropriate. She did. Pardon? Oh, a seal. It's not. It's, yeah, it's that they can have a seal that they utilize to show that it's their documentation. I don't know, they act like that's important. You know, it seems so weird because they're like, and you can have a seal. How often do we care about the seal? I mean, I love the seals, save the seals, but not the seal. So land bank limits are, they cannot condemn. They have no power of condemnation, so you're not giving that authority over to another entity. It does not have any taxing authority. They can't create an NID. They can't create any interior taxing. They can own only property in Branson, surprisingly enough. That's been a bit of a challenge in some of the other land banks, so that's a new restriction. They can only purchase property adjacent to property owned. So they did find that in certain jurisdictions, land bank was coming to bid at tax foreclosure auctions, and they were bidding against other prospective developers, and they were just random spots. And that took a control out that you really shouldn't. This should be a fix-up, but if somebody else wants to come to the table first and they want to do the work, then more power to them. There are means for you to enforce to ensure that they are getting their property up, but they did not want it, the legislature did not want to create a situation where you are competing with a purchaser. And you are required to maintain your property. That is another change. You must, within a certain time period, ensure that you have cleaned up the violations on the property, and I believe it's 5 years to get that property back into a use. Doesn't have to be the highest level use, doesn't have to be the ultimate intended use, but to a use. It can be a flower garden, right? You can plant your wildflowers while you're working on a larger collaboration. Land bank also can bid, so when they are the deemed purchaser in the tax sale, meaning no one else bids, then you are the minimum bidder. The land bank is a minimum bidder of the tax amount owed with the costs, right? The attorney's fees, all of that. However, they're not out the money. They're not taking that money in. But if there's somebody there who is bidding on the property and it's adjacent to already land banked owned property, they can bid up. So say the amount of debt on the property is $1,000. Starting bid is $1,000. Clay personally bids $1,001. If land bank is present, they can bid above him and outbid him. The only amount they have to pay, so they bid $1,002, is the $2. Once the land bank then sells the property and the property gets back in the tax rolls, those next few years, that taxing amount comes back into land bank, which is money that funds the land bank. Yes, ma'am.
Hal, let's take a step back for a second, okay? So the reason that we're bringing all of this before you tonight is you all had talked about the challenges that we have, most notably on 76, and as we're talking about the beautification and improvement efforts that we're trying to do there, it's not a secret that we've got some properties that have been in disrepair for a long time. And so what we had Holly and her team do is to research what is available to us statutorily to allow us to be able to form some kind of an entity that might give us the opportunities to do what she's saying with all the details of how we would do it. But the reason we're bringing it to you, because I know we're getting into the weeds, Hal. So we got to come up just a little bit here, which is there are opportunities for us to make investments into this type of a land bank to be able to have the opportunities, whether we pay for demolition or we pay for whatever it might be. We want you to start thinking about that so we can start putting some plans together for 2025 if you so choose, and how we can help address the blighted properties throughout the city. So that's really what we're trying to get to, is how do we get ownership of that in the easiest way, but yet obviously being deferential to other interested private parties that might want to buy.
And that's exactly what a land bank does. It allows that deferential. So if there is someone out there who wants to come forward with the money and develop that property, then they get it. This puts you in a situation where you don't have to take the extra steps. It also washes and cleans the title of the property so that you then are able to create out of these areas that nobody can put it together, right? If 1, 2, and 3 own the property, and it takes all that property owned by 1, 2, and 3 to get a development that comes in that then spurs that growth in that area, you've already jumped that hurdle because you own all 3 of those properties. So the collaboration of the properties, it can be beneficial for a larger development within an area. Doesn't mean you have to own all of the properties. That's what a condemnation is, right? I go in and I condemn. You may still want your property, but the city has decided we need all of this to do this particular improvement because it's blighted. That is a much more aggressive stance. This is a situation where you're like, nobody else wants it. So how do we get it in a position where we can create the interest that then makes others interested in the other nearby? So it's that economic development, right? It spurs it, it grows along the way. So these are 2 tools that help with that planning and execution of that power. Back up.
Keep rolling.
Okay, nope, I'm at the end.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, you said 20 minutes, and I think I am close. She tells me, shut up. I mean, you all do. Let's be serious.
Are we asking questions?
Yes,
So no,
yes.
if there was a book, how to clean up black properties for dummies. So there's a hotel, first of all, I'd purchase one of them. If there was a hotel that'd been sitting there for 12 years, plywood on the windows.
Vacant for 12 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Not built and in condition for 12 years.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it was built in 76 and it
Yep.
shut down in 2001. It's been sitting there with plywood over the windows and grass growing up through the concrete.
Yep.
What's the first step for the person that owns that property? I mean, how do they?
So with a land bank, they could donate it to land bank. They could say,
Okay.
I'm done, it has no value and it costs too much.
But let's
to
say
fix."
they don't.
They don't want to.
Yeah, let's say they don't want to, and they're like, well, this is my building. You can't just come and grab it. I mean,
So the means and mechanism for change of ownership, forced change of ownership, other than if they fail to pay their taxes, they do, right? So if they
yeah,
don't.
I'm saying they're up to date on
Right.
everything.
Up to date on taxes would be condemnation. But there are other means and mechanisms you have as a power, as a board, and as a city. And that is enforcement, holding a person accountable who owns nuisance property. And I would say that's nuisance property. I would be willing to guess there are multiple calls to the police department. There would be violations, as you described, to our building and our property maintenance code. So one of the things that a lot of cities have are a chronic nuisance. So it's a program, and you guys can pass something like this. We've kind of discussed it a little bit, but chronic nuisance is where you are a drain of the system, right? Basically, everybody gets the care of all of the service industry within the system. But there are some properties that you are managing because you're going out there and boarding them, right? You are contacting the owner on a regular basis to tell them, hey, there's an accumulation of trash. We drugged 2 bodies out. We did 5 arrests here. So we're going too often to that property. There are too many violations on this property, and you set a minimum amount, 6 calls in a month. And those could be 6 calls in a month to property maintenance, to complain that there's trash accumulation, there's people going in and trespassing on this property. So that property owner is no longer caring for that property. They may be preserving it so that if you decided to condemn it, they could get top dollar, but they aren't doing anything which a responsible landowner must do. And so you have the ability to ticket that person. You have the ability currently to go in and abate that nuisance, board up the property, and then that's a personal debt against the owner. You could file an action against the owner for the recovery of those funds. You also have simultaneously a special assessment that adds up on what they have to pay for the tax bill. So you make them responsible. So you have all of these options: chronic nuisance, writing tickets, abatement of nuisances, that puts a real value to the cost of them having delinquent property, which is appropriate, right? Because if you, neighbor, have appropriate property, you're doing your part. You're expending the money. It's not free, right? Or you could sell it. You may not want to sell it for what the true value is, but if it had much value in the last 12 years, you probably would have done it, right? You guys can demolish the structure. Guaranteed, a 12-year-old boarded up building would meet the qualifications of a dangerous building. Dangerous building does not mean it's going to fall on me, right? So you could demolish that structure, that clears that land, that puts that lien on that property. Unfortunately, probably not for somewhere along 76, but there are areas where once you've done the cost of demolition, it supersedes the value of the remaining lot. In those cases, what we find is they sit waiting for the tax sale and they don't change hands. And then you can't get anybody who wants to invest in it. And you've waited those 5 years. You don't want to be in that position. 2 years is enough, right? So those are all of the opportunities depending on your level of attention you want to give to it and work that you want to put into it. But you also have a personal debt and a lien on the property when you do a demolition. So you could foreclose on that before it goes to tax sale, and you could sell it at the curb, and then if some other investor wants to buy it, they could, or then the city could take it as part of their ownership and then piece it together with something else and pitch it for an economic development. Yep.
When does this kick in?
The LCRA? So the LCRA, you would utilize that as an agency. Think of them as your planner, right? The LCRA is going to say, we have an area, which is the entrance of Branson, say, and we don't see development. And we need to see if we spurred development in this area, it's got to meet the requirements in sanitary or blight. But if there was a plan for that area, an overall plan, and then we find whatever means and mechanisms we want to utilize within that plan. So they're all about the planning portion. They're not so much about the execution. It's more of a planning. The land bank is like second step, which is where you get ownership so I can do more proactive aspects of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because, I mean, really, if you don't hold them accountable or put some type of pressure on them, they're just going to be, that's why we are where we are, right?
And not just them. Your neighboring property is
Yeah.
not going to sell as well because they're going to say, I would like to build a hotel here, but you've got a hotel next to it that could be a parking lot, which would be a whole lot easier, or a field of flowers. I would prefer to see that, but I'm not going to invest my money in the person next door who's not being held accountable, who's paying the minimum, right? So the value of the structure is not a high tax amount. It has no use or somebody would have rented it, right? So it interjects pressure to get change. There is a point in which it's like your favorite pair of socks. It may have 3 holes in it, you still think it has a use. At some point, you need to throw that sock away and start over.
That's good.
Because with the t-shirt, you're keeping that. With the holes, 20 years, yeah.
Holly, on that, you said there was a 5 to 11 person board that could be created. Is there a quorum issue? Like, let's say it's 5 person, could that be all 5 aldermen?
So they create their own bylaws, but yes, if it's 5, it would be 3. So if it's a 5-member board, your quorum automatically is 3. But you can set a higher quorum than their bylaws, or in your creation of it, you could say the quorum is 4.
Right, but what I mean is, could all 5 of the, could we say it's a 5-person board, and could all 5 of those members be sitting aldermen?
Yes, but I wouldn't suggest
Just-
it for a
just
whole
for-
lot of reasons.
Just for one
because-
election cycle.
Yeah. There is within that group, and there's a lot of restrictions. Bear in mind, the people on that commission for land bank have a lot of regulations of what they can and can't do. They're at a higher conflict because thanks to Kansas City and St. Louis, we've seen all the little hijinks that can happen. So in rewriting the land bank, that was part of it. So you still need some checks and balances. But not just checks and balances, you need some thought process going on. You need to bring in some other people who can think outside the box on uses. So like we've seen land banks do in large urban areas, there's a lot of structures. They did a $1 to owner occupied. I'm gonna sell you any house. You have 3 years to fix it up. If you don't fix it up in those 3 years, I'm putting a deed of trust on the property. If it's not livable and occupied in 3 years, I'm taking it back. So if you found out that it wasn't fixable, then fine, they're gonna take it back. But if you don't, and you're kind of handy and you know enough people, you then could have a starter home. So there's lots of interesting ideas we've seen. We've seen them use vacant lots for neighboring, right? So if you have areas where there's large demolition going on, you don't have it, but a vacant lot, it may be to expand a neighboring property at a low cost. So there's lots of ways that I think as an alder would be difficult for you to be advocating that power and then wear your commissioner hat. And as a commissioner, you have the power to say what's best uses. I think it would be too tight.
Okay. Hal, what do you think would be a logical next step for this board if they wanted to consider doing something like this? Obviously, it would require some seed money investing, right, of some sort. So I don't know how the board feels, but if you'd like us to continue pursuing this type of an idea, to maybe put something together when we talk about, beautification and improvements of Branson, and obviously the focus has been predominantly on 76, but obviously this could apply to other areas as well. But I think it sounds like from conversations we've had that you all really want us to focus, and even with renewed conversations about segments 7 and 8 on Highway 76 improvement too. So if you'd like, we can take this as, if you want to kind of give us flesh this out some more. We can do that and then come back to you maybe end of first quarter 25 with some ideas on some tools that we can have in our tool belt to address these concerns.
Get her done.
Thank you. And my apologies to Alder Denham for leaving you out of the picture. That was really my bad.
You might have been sick. Was you there that night? Maybe you was out that
I
night.
think you were on vacation.
You might have been in California on that one.
But she is, she's just ghostly in there.
Who's in front?
Yeah, why is he down there?
Where is,
Party.
any discussion from Alderman of what we just heard?
I think you got to move forward. I mean, otherwise we'll be here 8 years, 10 years from now talking about what we're going to do about all these. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right?
Glenn, do you have any input?
Yeah, it would seem to me one of the things we should take a serious look at from an ordinance perspective is the idea of a chronic nuisance. I don't think we've addressed that, and that would seem to be a logical first step in all of this.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think it would be helpful, like we were saying, we're hearing the hypotheticals of what we could do. It would be helpful to see some actual plans so we know exactly which of these routes that we could take as opposed to sort of considering all these hypotheticals. Because, we could sort of run around for hours thinking about the things we could do, but sort of a firm plan or at least maybe 2 or 3 lanes that we could go about, I think would be helpful. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Well, I know this was at the end of our retreat that we had discussions on many topics, and this particular topic surfaced to the top as being most important for this board to take some action on. So Holly, thank you for doing that. Kathy, thank you for causing that to happen. And yeah, we need to, Ralph, do you have something?
I was saying hi to Ruth. No, I do actually have. I do. Well,
Have you met her?
met her. And with this, I don't know if it's an initiative or what it is, or just a kind of the plan moving forward. I think obviously the messaging in the community is going to be vitally important because this doesn't become a tool of kind of force. It's really something to kind of like if you've been sitting there like, come on boy, let's get some stuff done for the owner, and then if not, then there's a remedy maybe that they can lean on us to move that forward for them. But I think that's important is that because when you start talking about kind of land situations, we don't ever want it to look like we're going to get in the land business, because I think that's, as Kathy would say, from Wisconsin, over our skis or something like that. So I just wanted to.
Or the headline reads, "Oh, city aldermen are going after people's
Exactly,
private property."
yeah.
You know what I mean?
So and that's the thing. I mean, you just have some families that have owned property that they don't have the resources to do some sort of investment to it, and so maybe this is a tool that we can use to help them kind of clear that property or even get out of it and find a developer that can come in and do it. So and getting to that board, and Mark, to your point, I think it's important that we look at people that kind of have those far-reaching connections of whether it's outside development or even businesses that have connections throughout not just the community but throughout the country. I think that's important too, because I think that's where we're going to see the future of who's going to develop in Branson or invest in Branson. If they were already here, they'd already be doing it, and that's not happening. So we got to have that arm to get out there to find those people.
I mean, wouldn't you say the key word for for these properties is accountability and consequences?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
really.
really.
Truly. Yep. Yeah.
Well, I think also this is just another way to be transparent, and when areas are selected, people know if their properties are there, so it gives them the opportunity to know that, hey, something's got to be done. So hopefully they'll step up and be able to take care of their property, or at least they know that they can come to the city and talk and find out what some options are.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a clear line between the stick and the carrot, right? So what we heard, I think, would fall under the stick. So we have properties and property owners that have less than desirable curb appeal, right? Underperforming properties. And so as we're taking the time to pursue this, I'd like to also include on the economic incentive side, because I'm sure there are some properties out there, some property owners that have a dilapidated or an underutilized property that would like to improve it. They just do not have the financial resources. And I'd sure like to add to our quiver some possible economic incentives along with having the ability of the stick, because I think we're going to find some property owners that may be even embarrassed about their property and they would like to do something. And then we're also going to have some properties owners who live out of state and pretty much tell us to go jump in a lake, and that doesn't accomplish what we're wanting. So for the record, what we're wanting to do as a board is there's a lot of time, effort, and money being spent on the 76 CID improvements, right? It's north of $100 million, and it goes from Shepherd of the Hills to basically Fritz's, right? Fall Creek Road. And then from Fall Creek Road to Highway 65 has and does need some improvement. That's the front door. I cringe, and I know many people here cringe, that first-time visitor coming to Branson. They've read about it, they've been on the website, they get off Highway 65, they are now on 76. And for what they see for the first 2 miles, they must be asking themselves, why did we come here, right? We've been hoodwinked. So, and there's some in the community that feel that the 76 strip doesn't start until Roark Road. So this board has a strong desire to try to come up with as many tools as possible to improve all of the strip, to improve, what we're talking about now is those first 2 miles, not overbearing, not arm twisting, not condemnation, not any eminent domain, not any of the legal routes we have. But the question we all raised as a board was, Kathy, provide us some options and some avenues that we have available to us to try to make improvements along that corridor. And there's going to be several vehicles, several avenues to pursue, and it's going to take some time. But that was something that was of high importance to this board when we're looking at our 2025 goals. Fair enough?
Mr. Mayor? So Clay and I have both seen examples of this, of people that have torn down properties because it's less of a tax burden to have it sitting empty.
Sure.
As opposed to having a piece of property sitting, or a building sitting there. What I think is interesting about that is, okay, why are you tearing down the property? I mean, I understand you're going to have less of a tax bill, but ultimately you're probably going to want to sell that property someday down the road.
Right.
So let's say, okay, so you tear down the property, you have less of a personal property tax bill, but how long are you going to sit on it until it sells? So to your point about combining the carrot with the stick, maybe we help some of these properties tear it down and then sort of develop around it, which gives them the ability then to sell their property. Because if they tear that property down and just sit on it, nothing is going to change. I mean, yeah, their tax bill is going to be less, but nothing is going to change as far as people wanting to buy that property, unless perhaps we give some of these incentives to develop around it, and then maybe that property will become, more likely to be sold, essentially. So I think the idea of combining these different tools that we have in our toolbox could be very effective.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know who I'm asking this to, but let's say you've got a 6-unit strip mall or an old hotel or whatever that's just been sitting there for 15 years and it looks rough. What would keep a person, and they're up on their taxes and everything, what would keep a person, why wouldn't you just list that and try to get out from under it? If you don't have the money to get it up to par, what keeps people from, just list it and sell it? Are they waiting on something, the market, or what, you know what I mean, Kathy?
I totally know
Because I
what
think
you
there's a
mean.
lot of those situations out there. Sell the place if you're not going to do something with it.
But some people are looking at it, maybe it's a loss leader on their own portfolio, so that can help them with tax liabilities if they've got other investments around the country, and I think we've got a few of those in the city. And waiting for the market to kind of hit at just the right spot that benefits them the most. But you're right, there's lots of programs that I've seen in different states where you've got, for lack of a better word, Main Street beautification, grant opportunities, where you're trying to clean up blighted, visually blighted areas. And they're either low-interest loans or matches. If a property owner wants to invest so much in beautifying and upgrading their property, then the municipality or county can match those dollars if they meet certain criteria, et cetera. There's a whole wheel, like a color wheel of different ideas that we can put together. But again, you know, the idea is still always, we're looking at more from the nuisance side of things, from the lots of fire calls or police calls, people, you know, doing things they shouldn't be doing on that property. That doesn't benefit anybody. So being able to have the choice of all these different ideas together would be very helpful. So we'll work on putting a package and come back again. We'll probably have another study session again on it, if that's okay with you guys, and we'll bounce it off some more, get some more public input on it too.
Well, thank you for this. This is good.
Yeah, for sure. We have reports. Anybody have any reports? He'll put it on my list. It must have been important. So hearing none, I have a motion to adjourn the study session.
So moved.
We have motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say
Aye.
Thank you. Motion is approved. We will adjourn and start our Board of Aldermen meeting at promptly at 6 o'clock. Did you get that, Clay?